Hey, math class, just a heads up. Um, Office hours, and this is for every teacher. Okay, so if you need help, go ahead and check in with Zoom or Google Meet, whatever your teacher is doing. But first hour, you can meet with your teachers between 8 and 9:30. Second hour, none of you have me, but second hour is 9:45 to 11:15. Third hour is 11:30 to 1, and fourth hour is 1:15 to 2:45. Now, this also applies for fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, right? So these are the same hours regardless of what day we're on. So if you need help, check in with your teachers during this hour. If you need me, send me an email and then we will get on Google Meet together. Okay. So today we're going to start the last chapter before Christmas break, chapter 4. Right. And if you want to follow along in your ebook, I am going to be on page 272, although you can just follow along on my board here. Right, so the problem looks something like this. It says -5, 6, and it's got this circle here, and it says -1 and 1/6, right? And we're supposed to fill in the blank, right? So our options to fill in the blank are to use a greater than sign, which looks like this, a less than sign, which looks like this, or we could use an equal sign. But obviously, when we look at this, -1 and 5/6 and -1 and 1/6 are not equal, right? So we know it can't be equal here. So a couple of ways to do this, and that's what we're going to be working on today, is filling in the blank. So the first way that I'm going to show you is just using a number line, which is what we have been doing in the past, right? So if I mark 0 here, we know that this side is the positive side, this side is the negative side, right? So if I counted over here, I could count over to 1, 2, 3, 4. But since we're dealing with a base of -1 and we have a fraction, does everybody see that the denominator is 6 and 6, right? We're basically counting by 1/6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label my number line not by 1s and 2s. I'm going to count them by -1/6. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll just make a bunch of these, and hopefully it will be enough. All right. So let's look. This is -1/6. That's -2/6, -3/6, -4. 5/6, -6/6, which we know -6/6 should be just -1, right? And we could reduce several of these, right? -2/6, -3/6, -4/6. Those would all reduce as well. But now, instead of counting at -1, let's start with -1 and 1/6, -1 and 2/6, -1 and 3/6, -1 and 4/6, 1 and 5/6, and instead of going -1 and 6/6, we'll make this -2. All right, we'll make that -2. Okay, so the first number is -1 and 5/6, which looks like it is here. Right, this is -1 and 5/6, and the other point was -1 and 1/6, which is here. Okay, so we have used the number line to look at these two numbers. Now, just a reminder that this is the positive end of the chart and this is the negative end. Okay, so whatever number is the furthest to the right is the biggest number, right? Because if we had 2 over here, 2 is greater than 1, and it's further to the right. And whatever is further to the left would be the smallest number, right? Obviously, 0 is left of 1, so 0 is smaller than 1. -1 is less than 0, so -1 is smaller than 0. So between these two, the first number on the right is this one, which means that's the bigger number, which means we need to use the less than symbol. Remember, this is less, this is greater, right? So the first way to tell which number is larger is to use the less than or greater than symbols using a number line. Okay. And that can help sometimes. My opinion is that that might be the longest way to do this. I think there are shorter routes and easier routes just using math. But if you don't like dealing with fractions, that is a suitable option. So the next problem we get is 7. And this is example 2. It has 7 over 12. Fill in the blank. 8 over 18. Right? 7 over 12 over 8 over 18. Now, an easier way to do this is to look at the denominators and make them the same. Okay, so in this problem, there's 2 ways to do that. First off, we could just see what the least common multiple is, like what number will both 18 and 12 go into, and the answer would be 36, right? 18 times 2 would give us 36, and 12 times 3 would give us 36, right? So we can times this fraction by 3. 3 times 7 is 21. And 3 times 12, we already said was 36, right? And then we could times this side. If we're going to times the bottom by 2, we need to times the top by 2. 8 times 2 is 16. And 18 times 2 is 36. And when we look at these fractions, since the denominators are the same, we need to decide which numerator, which top number is larger. And obviously 21 is larger than 36. We would make a greater than symbol, right? This one, remember, I think you guys probably learned this. I don't know. You might have learned it as a Pac-Man, right? Pac-Man eats the bigger piece. Or you might have learned them as, and this is kind of a goofy one, but like you can tell I'm a terrible artist. You might have learned this as like an alligator, right? So the alligator is eating the bigger number. And in this case, 21 is larger than 16, so this is greater than, which means 7 over 12 is greater than 8 over 18. Now, another way to do this, instead of finding the least common multiple, is we could see if they reduce to the same number, which I think both of these can be reduced, and we can reduce them down to 6, right? So in this case, if we divided 12 by 2, we would get 6. Sorry, boy, I'm messing up here. 12 divided by 2, if we reduced it, we could get that down to 6, and this would be 3.5. Okay, and 8 over 18, we could reduce down to, divided by 3, which would give us 6, and 8 divided by 3 would give us 2.3 repeating. Right? 2.6 repeating. My mistake. 2.6 repeating. So, and then you can see 3.5 is larger than 2.6. So this one's a little more complicated, right? Because what if they don't reduce? You can see we're dealing with decimals here. That's not as good. So what can we use? Or we can use the LCM to reduce these numbers, to multiply these numbers into 36. Now let's take a look at another problem here, and let's move to, this is page 273. Okay, so this is going to be similar, and I'm just going to read it here. Okay, I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to kind of write down important information. But this is on page 273. It's example 3. It says, in Mr. Hang's class, 20% of the students, I'm going to write down 20% of the students own they call them roller shoes. All right, I'm not entirely sure what that is. All right. In Mrs. this was Mr. Huang. I don't know how to pronounce that name. And then it says in Mrs. Trevino's class, all right, it says Mrs. Trevino's class, 5 out of 29 kids own these roller shoes. All right, so it says, which class does a greater percentage, a greater fraction of students own roller shoes? So you can see now they gave us a percentage, and then we also have this that's 5 out of 29. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn 5 out of 29 into a fraction, okay? And some of us also know that we could turn 20% into a fraction as well. We could say 20 over 100, right? And so now we have two fractions that we're going to try to find. We're going to try to find which one is bigger. So if we wanted to, we could times this side, right? We times this by 100. And that would give us, let's see, let me get my blue marker out here. No, I lost it. There it is. So 5 times 100 is 500 over, and this is 2,900. This is using the LCM, right? Or, the method that we used last time with the LCM. And then this side, we could multiply this by 29. And so 29 times 100 is 2,900. And 29 times 20 should be, is that 580, I believe? All right, so this, we times both fractions to get common denominators. 580 is larger than 500, so this would be a greater than sign. A second way to do this is we could turn them into percents, all right? So I'm going to walk around to the other side of the board here, all right? We have 20% roller shoes and 5 out of 29, all right? So an alternative route is instead of making them both fractions, we can either make them both decimals or both as percents. We know if we use our calculator, right, we could take 5 divided by 29, right? So if you take 5 divided by 29, right, if we made 5 over 29 a decimal, it would give us, let me write it like this, 5 over 29 would give us, and my calculator says 0.1724. And 20%, if we took that to a decimal, we know we just move the decimal twice, 1, 2, it'll give us 0.20, right? So we can see that 0.20 is larger than 0.1724. And again, we would use the greater than symbol. All right, so the third pit stop here, right? The third pit stop is we could take 5 over, and I'll use the blue marker again. We could take 5 29ths and turn 5 over 29 into a decimal, which we just did, which was 0.1724. And we could turn this into a percent, right? Because we could just leave 20% as itself. And so we have 20%, and we move the decimal 1, 2. And this looks like it's 17.24%. 20% and 17.24%, we still have the greater than symbol. Okay, so a lot of options there, a lot of options. Okay, this one's going to be a little more straightforward. This is on page 273. This looks like example 4. That looks like example 4. All right, so example 4 gives us, it says order them from least, I'm going to write that down, order from least to greatest. All right, so we're going to have several numbers in here. All right, so here they are. We got 3.44. The second number they gave us is pi. The third number they gave us is 3.14. Some of you probably think that pi is equal to 3.14, but it's actually not true because pi is an irrational number, which means that it never stops and it never repeats. So if you've used 3.14 as pi, that's because we're rounding it, right? But in this case, we want the actual number. So 3.14 pi, and then we also have 3.4. Okay. All right, so we could look on the number line for all of these points, right? And we could just see which one is the largest. All right, so I'm going to do that way first. All right, I'm going to do that way first. So this is like 3.0. This would be like 3.1. 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5, right? So we could use the number line here, and we know if you don't know what pi is, to expand it would be to say 3.1415. There are more numbers after the 5, but since there's only 2, we could stop there. Next, you could just Google it, right? You guys have your nifty calculators there. You can just Google your pi, and it'll tell you how many digits there are. So let's go ahead and try to place these on the number line. So first off, 3.44 is like right here, I think, right? This is 3.44, good, right? Because 44 would be between, it's like 3.40 and 3.50, right? So between 40 and 50, 44 would be right about there. 3.4 is obviously this mark, which is here, right, at 3.4. We have 3.14, so again, this is like 3.10 and 3.20, right? So 14 would be probably in there, which means 3.1415 would be somewhere right next to it, right? This would be the pi, right? This would be pi. So if we wanted to order from least to greatest, we would say 3.14 pi, 3.4, and then 3.44. Right, so that's one way to use the number line to list which number is largest and which number is smallest. But I think there's another easier way here, okay? So I think there's an easier way, and let's take a look at it. First off, we know that pi, whoops, I just said that. We know that pi is 3.1415. Okay, again, you can just Google that if you don't know how much pi is. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write these numbers vertically, okay? And we'll just use as many decimals, right? Because this one has 2 numbers after the decimal. This pi that I'm using has 4 numbers after the decimal. This one has 2, and this one has 1 as well. All right, so let's go ahead and write these numbers vertically. So I have 3.44. I have 3.1415. I have 3.14, and then I have 3.4. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to compare these numbers individually, right? Because we know that the ones that have 3.4, right, like this number and this number are obviously bigger than these two, right? Because it's 3.4, right? So our job is to determine which of these two are larger. So if I wrote those over here, I have 3.44 and 3.4. I'm going to fill in this decimal with a 0, right, to make sure they both have the same, right? So which number is larger, 0.44 or 0.40? Well, this number is, so 3.44 is the biggest. 3.40 is the second biggest. Remember, we're writing from least to greatest here. And I can do the same thing with the pi and the 3.14. If I write those two, right, if I put a 0, 0 in there, what's larger, 1415 or 1400? Well, this one is larger, right? So 3.1415 would be the pi is the third largest, which means 3.1400 is the smallest. Right? We can just compare the digits after the decimal. All right. That was number 4. Let's go to the next page, which is 274. 274, I'm going to make our last problem here. This is number 5. Okay, so it's got all kinds of words, and this is another word problem. I'm just going to write it down as I go. Okay, so this is example 5 on page 274, and I'm just going to read it to you. And I'm going to write as much of the important information up on the board. So it says, Nolan is the quarterback on the football team. He completed 67% of his passes in the first game. He completed 0.64 in the second game. He completed 3/5 in the third game. And in the fourth game, he completed 69%. So we have a lot of stuff happening here because we have 2%, and we have a decimal, and we have a fraction. So what we need to do is we need to write them either all as percents, all as decimals, or all as fractions. My suggestion is not to use the fraction method because that will be probably the hardest because we'll have to get common denominators and things like that. What we can do is take them all to decimals. So I know that 69, I can turn this into 0.69 by moving the decimal twice. If we use our calculator and we divide 3 divided by 5, the calculator will tell you that that is 0.6. And since it only has one decimal, I'm going to put a 0 behind it. 0.64 is already as a decimal. And we know that, again, if we move this this way, we could turn this into 0.67. All right, so our job, once again, is to list from least to greatest. So this is very similar to what we just did, but now it's a word problem. Boy. So the smallest number up here is 0.60. So I'm going to use the original number, right? 0.60. I'm going to say 3/5. Okay. The next smallest, that was 60, right? What's next? 64, which was just 64. 0.64. All right, next smallest is 67%, right? And the largest was his last game, so it looks like he's getting a little bit better there at throwing the ball. This is 69%. All right, so these are the four from least to greatest. Remember, we turned them into decimals, and we saw which decimal was the smallest. Now, again, we could turn these all into percents, right? If you want to turn them into percents, that's fine too, because that's kind of in the middle, right? So two of them are already written as percents. This one is 69%. Use your calculator to get 3 divided by 5 should give you 0.60. If we move the decimal 1, 2, that gives us 60%. Once again, we move the decimal here, go 1, 2. This would give us 64%. And this one's already written as a percent, which is 67. So again, you can see that the smallest percent is 60. So 3/5 should be first because it's the least. The next smallest is 64, which was 0.64 here. And then the next two are written as percent. 67 is the third smallest percent. And then 69 is the greatest. Okay, so a lot of options here, a lot of ways to do these problems. Again, you could have written them all as fractions, right? We could turn these into fractions, make the 69 over 100, 67 over 100. But as we saw in the very first problem, sometimes fractions will give us decimals, and that makes it a little uglier. So, okay, reminder, if you need help doing the homework, I'm going to give you a couple problems here. If you need help doing the homework, see me during office hours. I'm not going to put them back on the board, but I will read them to you, all right? So if you're in my first hour class, send me an email. We'll get on Google Meet between 8 and 9:30. Third hour, again, that's first and fifth hour. Third hour, 11:30 to 1, third and seventh hour. Fourth hour is 1:15 to 2:45. So if you need help, send me an email. I will meet you on Google Meet. Here are the problems I want you to try. These are on page 200 and 75. I want you to do 5. You're going to do problems 1, 3, 5, 6, and 8. All right, if you have questions, please let me know. Good luck.